Welcome to Getting In, a college coach conversation. This is the first podcast of 2022, which is kind of crazy, exciting, but also, yee. I was looking for a photo I took on the Ohio State University campus, I thought 2 years ago. And as I was going through my phone photos, I realized it was really 5 years ago. So, that's a little scary. We've been doing this podcast weekly for a really long time, and I'm excited to welcome in 2022 with all of you. If you look forward to this podcast every week and find it really valuable to you, I would love it if you would go and review us on Apple Podcasts. It'll help more people find us and access all the information that we're sharing. So if you do one thing today as a new sort of kickoff to 2022 and you want to make that reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, I would not complain. I would be very excited. So thank you. I know it's January, but we're actually going to be talking about the summer program specifically in today's show. But before we go to that, we're going to switch it up a little bit. And we're actually going to lead off with your questions. And joining me for that, as she so often does, is my colleague Shannon Vasconcelos, who also happens to be a former financial aid officer at both Boston University and Tufts University. Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Beth.
How are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. We have lots of questions. So
Yes.
let's kick off with one for you.
Okay.
And here we go. This one comes to us from Lisa, who asks, if you've applied early decision, but your financial situation has changed since applying, in this situation, your father hasn't worked since October, can you ask admissions for more scholarships if admitted?
Absolutely. And in fact, you can, if your financial situation changes, you can go back and let the school know that at any time, whether it's you apply early decision, regular decision, if it's the summer after you've enrolled, if it's midway through the school year and you've been attending, you can still, and a parent loses a job, you can still go back to the financial aid office at that point and ask for reconsideration of your aid package. As we've talked about probably a number of times along the way, the FAFSA form that you're completing to apply for financial aid is always out of date because it asks for your financial information from the year that's 2 years before the year you're
Right.
applying for aid for. So obviously a lot can happen in 2 years. And as Lisa's family has found out, a lot can even happen in a couple months since you applied early decision. So you can absolutely go back to the school, ask for reconsideration of any financial aid offers based on your change in circumstances. And you just want to lay out the case, explain, give dates, facts, figures, when your father lost his job, how much that decreases your income, all of that, ask for reconsideration of a financial aid package. And hopefully they are willing to do that. Hopefully they award you some nice, generous scholarship funding. If they don't, there is always that fine print in the early decision contract that you're essentially signing. When you apply early decision, you are agreeing to enroll in that school if they accept you, but there is fine print there that says you can get out of that commitment if the finances make it impossible for you to attend. And this is the exact kind of situation that fine print is meant to allow for. It's not really meant to allow for, well, I thought you'd give me a whole lot more scholarships and I was hoping for more scholarships and you didn't give them to me, so I'm going to withdraw for that reason. That's not really what that fine print means. It's exactly this situation. My financial circumstances a few months ago when I applied early decision would have allowed me to pay for this school, and now they don't. And here's why. You want to lay that out for the financial aid office. And just the quick thing, just because Lisa, you used the word scholarships, and I don't know how exactly you're using that term because the terms here can be confusing. Usually when we use the term scholarship, we are talking about merit-based money as opposed to the need-based free money is usually referred to as grants. but that's actually not always the case. There are some schools have started calling the need-based grants scholarships because it kind of sounds more prestigious, and they figured out that more students will come if we call our money scholarships instead of grants. So I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to here, if you're actually speaking about merit scholarship money because you didn't qualify for need-based financial aid, or never applied for need-based financial aid. If that's the case, I mean, you can always ask for more merit scholarship money, and they may or may not say yes or no to that question. But I think your change in financial circumstances certainly warrants them taking a second look. If by any chance you did not apply for need-based financial aid up front, you should do so now. And I think that's the first question the school would ask you if you went back to them and said, I can't afford this school anymore. Can you reconsider my scholarship funding? They'll say, did you apply for financial aid? If you say no, they'll say, well, do it now. And again, you'll just have to go through the documentation process of that income that's showing up on the FAFSA is not really reflective of your family situation now. And you hope that they take that into consideration and award you a nice, fat, generous financial aid package. But if they don't, you do still have that out in the early decision contract. If that school really is not affordable to your family anymore, you can get out of your early decision contract and go someplace more affordable.
Cool.
Yeah. And so the first question for you, Beth, is about calling a school when you don't like their decision. Is it ever okay to call a college after a denial or a deferral? And if so, who should you call?
Sure. So I actually read that as who should call, who should be the one making the call.
Who should call?
But a couple of things here. First, we did a show on December 16th all about what do you do after your decisions come in, if you were deferred, if you were denied, if you were accepted, that kind of thing. So I would encourage everyone who is eager to hear this answer to go back and listen to that show from December 16th. What I will say is this: the colleges will generally let you know what kind of contact they will encourage after a deferral in this specific case or a denial. And in some cases, they'll even provide a number for you to call, or they may provide an email address for you to email to. In general, not all schools, though, I will say, will welcome a phone call. So you want to kind of take a look and see. And sometimes, even if they don't say anything about calling, you could always call and ask to speak with someone. If you're a student, I think that's one thing, right? You're calling to just maybe better understand the decision. If you are deferred, I think the approach there is hey, I'm excited to still be in the running. I'm just curious if there's anything that you were missing, or anything that you need an explanation for. So it's more of a information gathering type of call. And never really do I encourage a call to say, I can't believe you made this decision. Explain it to me or something like that, right? That's not the goal here.
Right.
But when I saw this question, one thing that I did want to address is the idea that who should make the call. So it's certainly great for the student to engage with the admissions office, especially if the admissions office provides a number and sort of encourages that engagement. But it is also okay for the school counselor to make a phone call. And I know we have a lot of school counselors who listen to the show. And so I wanted to directly address that population. Now, I will preface this by saying that many of you do not have the time to be making these phone calls. Totally get that. What I want to address is the idea that you might be afraid to make that call. Like, oh, they don't want to talk to me. They don't want to hear from me. When in point of fact, actually, many of them would be very, very happy to have a conversation with you. Especially if there is a decision that is somehow, I don't know, mystifying to you or surprising to you in some way, and you really just want to better understand. Same thing as when a student calls attitude is really important, right? You don't want to call up and be an angry person. And I'm sure our school counselor population is thinking, oh, I would never do that anyway, because, this is a relationship and you're going to have other students who are going to apply in the future. And, that this is going to be an ongoing thing. For the student, it's might be a one and done. So it's even more important from your perspective that it's a good relationship. But if you get a decision that really surprises you or is not in line with decisions you've seen from that school in the past, and because you wrote the letter of recommendation or you collected the students' materials and sent them off, that it's a good application and you assumed that the student would be successful, I think those are times to call, with the caveat that anytime a school is admitting less than half of their applicant pool, you do sort of have to be careful to assume much of anything,
Right.
especially as those numbers get lower, right? So if they're accepting only 30% or 20% or 15% or 5%, that's the time where we start to figure like, okay, I really have no idea what's going to happen here. And the decision, if Stanford turns down your kid, that is the highest flyer you guys have had ever come through, it still probably shouldn't be a shock. It doesn't mean you can't call and have a conversation, but especially when a school that either routinely admits students from your school and for some reason this year did not admit students of the same kind, or didn't admit anyone, or you've never had a student apply there, but that this student who did apply looks a lot like the average accepted students at that school. These are all reasons why you might want to call. And the questions really are just, hey, I want to understand this. Have your standards changed? Are you looking for a different type of student? Did you get double the applications that you usually do? We're seeing that a little bit. I know that in the early round at Auburn, they had, they maybe do rolling. I didn't double check it, but what I know is that by the midpoint of December, they had 115% more applications than they'd had the year before. That makes for decisions that are probably going to be a little surprising. So understanding the context, I think, is really important. And then also important for future years, like, wow, this school is becoming more popular. I would have said it was a likely school before. Now I'm thinking maybe it isn't. And so that will help you also to guide future students. So I just want to encourage counselors everywhere that it's fine to pick up the phone and make those calls, and that my experience as an admissions officer and my colleagues' experiences as admissions officers is that those calls are typically welcome, and the admissions officer would be happy to have that conversation and help to explain context if there is an explanation. Yeah. So, all right.
Out of my own curiosity,
Sure.
as an admissions officer, how prepared are you to have that phone call? If a school counselor calls you, asks about a specific student, are you then kind of looking through their whole application? Do you have like notes on sort of reasons why they weren't admitted that you're immediately going to? What does that conversation kind of look at like from the admissions officer's perspective?
Well, the way that we did it when I was at Penn is that whoever called in would have first talk to an assistant who would take down the name of the student they were calling about, if they were calling about a specific student, and then pull the file. And so I would have the file. Now they read online, so my guess is it's a lot easier to look something up. But in general, we would have a heads up so that when I returned the call, I knew what it was about. How forthcoming an admissions officer is going to be about a specific file is really going to depend on the admissions officer, their comfort level with the counselor that they're talking to, with the school's policies, so the school may have a policy of, we don't disclose anything. We don't discuss the student's file with anyone other than the student. So, you may not get some good info about that student in particular. And that may ultimately not be the goal. The goal may be to get broader context around, what I might say to a counselor that when I was an admissions officer who I didn't know would be to explain, I get that this represents some of your best students. Let me help you. Let me explain what a really excellent applicant looks like to
Yeah.
us. And I might explain, expectations. I'm thinking specifically about a situation like this when I was at Penn, where the student was a great student at the high school, but not at all, it had not achieved at the level that we would have anticipated at Penn. So helping that counselor who was brand new, who was actually not really a school counselor by training and who kind of had filled in
Mhm.
on the fly, helping her to understand what our expectations were. And those calls can be helpful for that as well. But yeah, I think it's less that unless you have a relationship, I don't know that they're gonna get super specific with you about why the student wasn't admitted, but they can often provide some bigger context around it. And then it might also be an opportunity if the student was deferred to, if you feel strongly, hey, the entire school population supports this student. This student is someone we love. We would love, we know that the student really likes this school. If that's true, if that's something you feel confident and comfortable saying, it may not make a difference, but they may make a note in the file and just, hey, this is a big,
Mhm.
they have a lot of fans, this student. And, that could be nice as well. But again, not the goal of the call. I think really the goal of the call is to understand the context of a decision that you found surprising in light of decisions that have been made in the past.
Gotcha.
All right. Well, we got through a whopping 2 questions. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we are going to hope to get through at least 2 more and maybe a little bit more than that. So stick around.